I was sitting in my car in the near-empty parking lot of Jefferson High School, crying into a paper plate of cold spinach artichoke dip, when Principal Davidson knocked on my window. It was 10:15 on a Friday night in December, and I just fled the faculty Christmas party for the third year in a row, unable to fake holiday cheer for one more minute. Through my fogged-up window, I could see his concerned expression, and my first thought was that I was about to get fired for being the weird teacher who eats alone in her car. Instead, he asked, "Mind if I join you?" And that question changed everything. To understand why I was having a breakdown in a parking lot at 37 years old, you need to know about the years that led up to that moment. The years when I slowly became invisible to myself and everyone around me. I became a high school English teacher when I was 24, fresh out of graduate school with a master's degree in literature and idealistic dreams about inspiring young minds. I imagined myself as the teacher students would remember decades later, the one who made them fall in love with Shakespeare or Toni Morrison, who helped them discover their own voices through writing. And for the first few years, teaching was everything I'd hoped it would be. I loved my students, loved the material, loved the feeling of watching someone's eyes light up when they finally understood a complex text. I poured everything into my classroom, staying late to grade papers, arriving early to tutor struggling students, decorating my room with literary quotes and student artwork. But somewhere around my 30th birthday, things started to shift. Or maybe I started to shift, and the job stayed the same. I began noticing the parts of teaching that nobody warns you about in graduate school. The exhaustion that goes bone deep. The emotional labor of managing not just curriculum but adolescent crises, parental complaints, administrative demands, and standardized testing pressures. The way you can spend all day surrounded by people, 150 students, 30 colleagues, countless interruptions, and still feel completely alone. My personal life didn't help. I dated sporadically through my 20s, nothing serious, and by my early 30s, most of my college friends were married with children. They'd moved to suburbs, had weekend plans that revolved around soccer games and birthday parties, spoke a language of mortgage rates and preschool waiting lists that I couldn't contribute to. I was living alone in a small apartment, spending my evenings grading papers and my weekends meal prepping and binge-watching shows I'd already seen. I told myself I was content, that I valued my independence, that I was focused on my career. But the truth I wouldn't admit, even to myself, was that I was desperately lonely. At school, I developed a persona, competent, professional, slightly reserved. I was friendly enough with my colleagues, but I never got truly close to anyone. I'd eat lunch in my classroom, claiming I needed to prepare for afternoon classes. I'd skip happy hours, saying I had papers to grade. I'd arrive at faculty meetings exactly on time and leave the moment they ended. The other teachers seemed to have formed these tight-knit groups. There was the young teachers' crowd, 20-somethings who went out for drinks every Friday and dated each other, and seemed to turn everything into a social event. There was the parent-teachers group, mostly women in their 40s and 50s who bonded over their children's activities and traded parenting advice. There was the coaches' clique, PE teachers and coaches who talked endlessly about sports and had their own inside jokes. And then there was me, not young enough for the first group, not a parent so excluded from the second, not athletic so invisible to the third. I existed in this strange in-between space, acknowledged but not included, known but not seen. The Christmas parties were always the worst. They were held in the school library, decorated with the same tired tinsel and construction paper snowflakes every year. There would be a potluck. I always brought store-bought cookies because I lived alone and couldn't justify cooking for a crowd, and a secret Santa exchange with a $20 limit. Every year, I'd arrive at the party with good intentions. I'd tell myself this would be the year I'd make real connections, that I'd have actual conversations, that I'd stay until the end and maybe even suggest getting coffee with someone afterward. And every year, I'd find myself standing alone by the punch bowl, watching everyone else laugh and hug and exchange stories about their lives outside school. I'd make small talk with whoever happened to be getting food at the same time I was, but these conversations never went deeper than, "How are your classes going?" Or any plans for winter break? After an hour or so, I'd feel the familiar tightness in my chest, the pressure building behind my eyes. I'd quietly gather my coat, slip out the back door, and sit in my car until I was calm enough to drive home. Then I'd spend the rest of the evening telling myself I was fine, that I preferred being alone anyway, that needing people was a weakness I'd outgrown. But I wasn't fine, and I hadn't outgrown needing people. I'd just gotten better at pretending I didn't. By the time I turned 35, the loneliness had become a constant companion, so familiar I barely noticed it anymore. It was there when I woke up in the morning with no one to say good morning to. It was there during lunch when I ate the same turkey sandwich in my empty classroom while listening to other teachers' laughter drift down the hallway. It was there in the evenings when I'd correct essays and realize I could go days without having a meaningful conversation with another adult. I'd started seeing a therapist around this time, Dr. Michelle Torres, a kind woman in her 50s who specialized in anxiety and depression. She was the only person who knew how I really felt, the only one I could be honest with about the depth of my isolation. "Do you think it's possible I'm just not meant for close relationships?" I asked her during one session. "Maybe I'm too introverted, too set in my ways. Maybe some people are just meant to be alone." "I don't think anyone is meant to be alone," she said gently. "But I think you've built some pretty high walls to protect yourself from rejection. The question is whether those walls are protecting you or imprisoning you." I didn't have an answer. I just knew that maintaining those walls took constant effort, and I was getting tired. The December I turned 37, I was probably at my lowest point. It had been a brutal fall semester, difficult classes, a particularly nasty parent complaint that had required multiple meetings with administration, and a brief, failed attempt at online dating that had only reinforced my belief that I was somehow fundamentally unlovable. When the invitation for the annual Christmas party went out, my first instinct was to skip it entirely. I could claim I was sick or that I had family obligations, but something, pride, maybe, or stubborn determination not to be completely pathetic, made me decide to go. I wore a red sweater I'd bought specifically for the occasion, put on makeup for the first time in weeks, and gave myself a pep talk in the bathroom mirror before leaving my apartment. "You're going to go. You're going to stay for at least an hour. You're going to have at least 3 real conversations. You can do this." The party was exactly as I'd expected. Loud, crowded, overwhelming. I made it through the first 30 minutes by focusing on the food, building elaborate appetizer combinations on my plate, and eating slowly to give myself something to do with my hands. I attempted a few conversations. I talked to Sarah, one of the math teachers, about her upcoming vacation. I chatted with Robert from the history department about a book we'd both read. I even participated in the secret Santa exchange, receiving a generic candle from whoever had drawn my name. But by 8:30, the familiar panic was setting in. The room felt too small, too hot, too full of people who all seemed to belong except me. I could feel the tears building, and I knew I had maybe 5 minutes before I'd start crying in front of everyone. So I did what I always did. I grabbed my coat, mumbled something about not feeling well to the person nearest the door, and escaped into the cold December night. I sat in my car, in the far corner of the parking lot where the streetlights didn't quite reach, and let myself fall apart. I cried for all the Christmases I'd spent alone, for all the friendships I'd never formed, for the life I'd imagined at 24 that looked nothing like the reality at 37. After about 15 minutes, I wiped my face and noticed the paper plate of appetizers I'd assembled sitting on my passenger seat. I'd apparently grabbed it on my way out without thinking. The spinach artichoke dip had congealed, the crackers had gone soggy, but I ate it anyway because what else was I going to do? Go home to my empty apartment and eat nothing. That's when I heard the knock on my window. I jumped, knocking my plate onto the floor, and turned to see Principal James Davidson standing outside my car, his breath visible in the cold air. He was in his early 50s, a tall man with graying hair who'd been principal at Jefferson for about 5 years. I'd had minimal interaction with him beyond the usual administrative check-ins and the formal observation every teacher received annually. My first emotion was pure embarrassment. Here I was, the weird English teacher, crying alone in her car while eating party food like some kind of tragic character from a depressing indie film. My second emotion was fear. Was I about to get reprimanded for leaving the party early? For being antisocial? For generally failing at being a normal human being? I rolled down my window, trying to quickly wipe away any remaining tears. Principal Davidson, I'm sorry, I wasn't feeling well. I was just about to drive home. Sophia, he interrupted gently, I'm not here to scold you. I saw you leave and wanted to make sure you were okay. He paused, looking uncertain in a way I'd never seen from him before. Would you mind if I joined you for a minute? I was so surprised, I couldn't think of a polite way to say no. I just nodded and unlocked the passenger door. He climbed in, bringing cold air with him, and settled into the seat. For a long moment, we both sat there in awkward silence, staring through the windshield at the dark parking lot. I hate these parties too, he finally said. I turned to look at him, certain I'd misheard. What? The Christmas parties, the forced socializing, the small talk. He smiled sadly. I'm supposed to be the one who loves this stuff, right? The principal, the community builder, the one who brings everyone together. But honestly, I find it exhausting. I didn't know what to say. Principals weren't supposed to admit to vulnerability. They were supposed to be endlessly energetic, perpetually positive, always modeling perfect professional behavior. I saw you leave, he continued, and I recognized something in your expression. The same look I see in my own mirror at these events. The look that says you're drowning in a room full of people. Something in my chest loosened slightly. I thought I was the only one who felt that way. That's what everyone thinks, he said. That's the terrible irony of loneliness, isn't it? We all feel alone, but we're all so good at hiding it that we convince each other we're the only ones struggling. He told me then about his own story. How he'd gone through a divorce 3 years earlier, after 22 years of marriage. How his ex-wife and kids had moved to Colorado, and he saw his children, 2 daughters in college, maybe 3 times a year now. How he'd thrown himself into work because it was easier than going home to an empty house. How he'd become really good at playing the role of the confident, together administrator while feeling completely lost inside. I'm sitting in my office most nights until 9 or 10, he admitted. Not because I have that much work to do, but because I don't know what else to do with myself. I order takeout and eat at my desk and tell myself I'm being productive, but really I'm just avoiding the fact that I have no idea how to build a new life at 52. I found myself opening up in a way I never had with anyone except Dr. Torres. I told him about the loneliness that had been building for years, about feeling invisible despite being surrounded by people all day, about the shame of being 37 and single and increasingly convinced that something was fundamentally wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you, he said firmly. There's something wrong with a culture that makes us all pretend we're fine all the time. That treats vulnerability as weakness instead of courage. We talked for almost 2 hours in that car. About teaching, about the pressure to perform happiness, about the specific kind of isolation that comes from being in a helping profession where you're supposed to have it all together for everyone else. About our families, our regrets, our fears about the future. He told me about his daughter Emily, who was struggling with anxiety in college and who he felt helpless to support from so far away. I told him about my mother, who called every Sunday with thinly veiled concern about my unmarried status and suggestions for putting myself out there more. We laughed about the absurdity of faculty meetings and the impossible demands placed on teachers and the way education had changed since we'd both started. You're an excellent teacher, he said at one point. I've observed your classes, read your student evaluations. Your students love you. They feel seen by you. Then why do I feel like such a failure? I whispered. Because you're measuring yourself against a standard that doesn't exist, he said. This idea that we're all supposed to have perfect lives and perfect relationships and perfect happiness all the time. It's nonsense. We're all just making it up as we go along and hoping we don't mess up too badly. As we talked, something shifted. The embarrassment I'd felt initially faded. The walls I'd built so carefully started to crack. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely seen and understood by another person. Around 10:15, he checked his watch and said, "I should probably let you go. You're likely freezing, and I've kept you here talking about my problems when I originally came to check if you were okay." "I'm okay," I said, and I was surprised to realize I meant it. "Actually, I'm better than I've been in a long time. Thank you for knocking on my window." "Thank you for letting me in," he said. Then he paused before getting out of the car. "Sophia, I know this might sound strange, but would you be interested in having coffee sometime? Not as principal and teacher, just as two people who apparently both hate Christmas parties and eat alone more often than they'd like to admit." I felt something flutter in my chest, hope, maybe, or just the unfamiliar sensation of connection. "I'd like that." We exchanged phone numbers, and he climbed out of my car, waving as he walked to his own vehicle across the parking lot. I drove home that night feeling lighter than I had in months, not because I thought Principal Davidson and I were going to fall in love or because one conversation had solved all my problems, but because I'd been vulnerable with someone and the sky hadn't fallen, because I'd let someone see me struggling and they hadn't run away, because maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as I thought. James, he insisted I call him James outside of school, which felt weird for about 2 weeks before it started feeling natural, and I met for coffee that Sunday at a small cafe downtown. I almost canceled 3 times, convinced that the connection I'd felt in the car had been a fluke, that in the light of day with caffeine and pastries between us, we'd have nothing to say to each other. I was wrong. We talked for 3 hours. About books. He was a huge mystery fan while I loved literary fiction, and we debated genre versus literature with the kind of passionate engagement I usually reserved for classroom discussions. About music. We both loved jazz, which surprised me because he seemed more like a classic rock person. About our childhoods, grown up in a military family, moving every few years, never quite learning how to maintain long-term friendships. I'd grown up in a small town in Ohio, the youngest of 3 children, always feeling like an afterthought in a busy household. "I think that's why I became a teacher," I told him. "I wanted to be the person who paid attention to the kids who felt invisible, because I know what that feels like. And I became an administrator because I wanted to create schools where teachers felt supported," he said. "Because I spent 10 years teaching history and feeling like nobody in administration cared about what actually happened in classrooms." It was easy, talking to him, easier than it had been with anyone in years. There was no pressure to perform or impress, no need to fill silences with meaningless chatter. We could be honest about our struggles without it feeling like complaining, could admit to fears and insecurities without judgment. That first coffee turned into weekly coffee. Every Sunday morning, we'd meet at the same cafe, order the same drinks, black coffee for him, latte for me, and talk for hours. Sometimes we'd discuss school, but we had an unspoken agreement to keep those conversations minimal. This wasn't a professional relationship. It was something else entirely. James became my friend. My real friend, maybe the first genuine friend I'd had in years. He was someone I could text when I had a rough day at work, someone who understood the specific frustrations of education, because he lived them too. He was someone I could be completely honest with about my loneliness and my fears without worrying that I was burdening him, because he was equally honest about his own struggles. "My daughter Emily called last night," he told me one Sunday in January. "She's thinking about dropping out of college, says the anxiety is too much, that she can't handle the pressure. And I'm in Arizona while she's in Colorado, and I feel completely helpless. I couldn't help her when she was a kid because I was always at work, and I can't help her now because I'm too far away." "You're helping by listening to her," I said. "By not dismissing her feelings or telling her to just push through. That matters more than you think." "Is that what you needed when you were struggling?" he asked. "Someone to just listen." "Yes," I said simply. "I needed someone to see that I wasn't okay and not try to fix me, just acknowledge that it was hard. That's what you did in the parking lot." Our friendship raised some eyebrows at school. Teachers who'd barely noticed me before suddenly became very interested in why the principal and I were seen having coffee together on weekends. There were whispers, speculation about whether we were dating. Sarah from the math department cornered me in the faculty lounge one afternoon. "So, you and Principal Davidson." "We're friends," I said, measuring coffee grounds into the ancient machine. "Just friends," she raised an eyebrow suggestively. "Yes, just friends. Is that really so hard to believe? That a man and a woman could be platonic friends?" "No, you've always been so private. And now suddenly you're having regular coffee dates with the principal. It's different." She wasn't wrong. It was different. I was different. Having one genuine friendship had started to crack open something in me, made me slightly more willing to engage with other people. I started occasionally eating lunch in the faculty lounge instead of my classroom. I said yes when a group of teachers invited me to see a movie one Friday night. I wasn't suddenly the life of the party, but I was less aggressively isolated. James noticed the change. "You seem lighter," he observed during one of our Sunday meetings in February. "Like something shifted." "I think I was so scared of being rejected that I rejected everyone first," I admitted. "But talking to you made me realize that vulnerability isn't the weakness I thought it was, that it's actually the only way to have real connections." "Well, I'm glad my midlife crisis could be useful to you," he said with a grin. "We're mutually beneficial midlife crises," I corrected. "Very efficient." But there were complications, too. Because as much as I valued James's friendship, and as much as I tried to keep things strictly platonic, I couldn't completely ignore the fact that I was developing feelings for him that went beyond friendship. It wasn't dramatic or overwhelming. I didn't lie awake at night pinning for him or fantasize about some romantic future together. It was more subtle than that. A warmth in my chest when I saw his name on my phone, a heightened awareness when we were together, a slight disappointment when our Sunday meetings had to be rescheduled. I talked to Dr. Torres about it during our regular sessions. "Are you planning to tell him how you feel?" she asked. "Absolutely not," I said immediately. "He's my boss, for one thing, and more importantly, he's my friend, my only real friend. I'm not going to risk that because of some feelings that will probably fade." "Will they fade?" she asked gently. "They have to," I said, "because I can't lose this friendship. It's too important." I thought I was managing the situation well, keeping my feelings carefully contained while maintaining our friendship. And then March happened. I first met Rachel Morrison at a district-wide professional development workshop in early March. She was a guidance counselor at another high school in our district, warm and outgoing in a way that immediately drew people to her. During one of the breakout sessions, she ended up at my table, and we discovered we both had strong opinions about the inadequacy of standardized testing as a measure of student learning. "Finally, someone who gets it," she said enthusiastically. "I've been arguing about this all morning with people who think test scores are the only thing that matters." We exchanged numbers and agreed to get coffee sometime, and I actually followed through, another change that surprised me. We met the following week, and I found myself genuinely enjoying her company. Rachel was easy to talk to, funny, passionate about her work with students. She'd been through her own struggles, a bad breakup a year earlier, family issues with her parents who didn't approve of her career choice, and she was refreshingly open about them. "I spent so long pretending everything was fine," she told me during our second coffee meetup. "And then I had a complete breakdown at work, crying in my office between student appointments. That was my wake-up call to actually deal with my stuff instead of just shoving it down." I found myself telling her about my own struggles with loneliness, about the parking lot breakdown at Christmas, about James. Not everything, but more than I'd told anyone except Dr. Torres. "Wait, your principal? You're friends with your principal?" She looked impressed. "That's actually kind of great. Administrators can be so disconnected from what teachers and counselors actually experience. But if he's willing to be real with you, that's valuable." Rachel started joining James and me for coffee some Sundays. It was strange at first, our twosome becoming a threesome, but Rachel fit easily into our dynamic. She was more extroverted than either James or me, often steering conversations in new directions, bringing energy when we got too introspective. One Sunday in April, After Rachel had left to meet other friends, James turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Sure," I said, stirring my now-cold latte. "Do you think Rachel is interested in me? Romantically, I mean." I felt something drop in my stomach. "Why do you ask?" "She's been texting me during the week. Not about anything important, just chatting, sharing funny things that happened at work, asking my opinion on random topics. And last week she suggested the three of us should go to this jazz concert downtown next month, but then she mentioned that if you couldn't make it, maybe just the two of us could go." I forced my expression to remain neutral, even as my heart was doing complicated things in my chest. "She might be. She's recently single and you're a good guy. It would make sense." "Would that be weird for you?" he asked. "If I dated her?" "Why would it be weird for me?" I said, aiming for casual and probably missing by a mile. "Because she's your friend now too. I don't want to make things complicated in our group dynamic." Our group dynamic. That's how he saw this, the three of us as a friend group, equal and uncomplicated. While I'd been here nursing feelings I couldn't act on, he'd been completely oblivious to them, seeing me exactly as I'd presented myself. As a friend, nothing more. "You should ask her out if you're interested," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "Don't not pursue something because you're worried about me. I'm fine." He looked relieved. "Thanks, Sophia. I wasn't sure how to handle this. It's been so long since I've even considered dating anyone. After the divorce, I told myself I was done with all that. But Rachel is. I don't know, she makes me feel like maybe I'm not too old and broken to try again." I went home that afternoon and cried for the first time since the parking lot. Not dramatic sobbing, just quiet tears of disappointment and self-recrimination. Because of course James didn't see me romantically. Why would he? I'd spent months establishing myself as his friend, his confidant, his safe person to be vulnerable with. I'd made myself into exactly what I'd told him I wanted to be. Dr. Torres was sympathetic, but not particularly surprised, when I told her about the situation during our next session. "What did you think was going to happen?" she asked gently. "I don't know. I guess I thought maybe eventually he'd see me differently, or that my feelings would fade and it wouldn't matter. I didn't think he'd meet someone else and ask my permission to date her." "Are you going to tell him how you feel?" "No," I said firmly, "because it won't change anything. He sees me as a friend, and even if by some miracle he was interested, he's still my boss. There's a power dynamic there that makes it inappropriate, so I'm just going to deal with it. Let him date Rachel, be happy for them, move on." "That's a very mature approach," Dr. Torres said. "But also make sure you're not using maturity as an excuse to avoid dealing with your feelings." James asked Rachel out the following week. She said yes immediately. They went to the jazz concert. I claimed a scheduling conflict, and apparently it went really well because they started officially dating after that. Rachel was thoughtful enough to check in with me before they made it public knowledge in our friend group. "I wanted to make sure you're okay with this," she said when we met for coffee, just the two of us. "I know you and James were friends first, and I don't want to mess that up." "I'm completely okay with it," I lied smoothly. "You guys are great together." And they were. That was the worst part. James seemed lighter when he talked about Rachel, more hopeful about the future. Rachel was clearly good for him, bringing out a more playful side I hadn't seen before. When the three of us hung out together, which became less frequent as they started doing more couples activities, they were affectionate but not obnoxiously so, always making sure to include me in conversations. I was happy for them. I was also devastated for myself. Both things were true simultaneously. I started pulling back slightly from the friendship, not dramatically enough for James to notice, but enough that I didn't have to witness quite as much of his new relationship happiness. Our Sunday coffees became every other week, then once a month. I was always busy when they invited me to join them for dinners or movies. "Is everything okay?" James asked me in late May, catching me after a faculty meeting. "You've been distant lately. Did I do something wrong?" "No, you're fine. I've just been really busy with end-of-year stuff. You know how it is. Final exams, grades, all the administrative nonsense." He didn't look entirely convinced, but he let it go. And I felt guilty for lying, but not guilty enough to tell him the truth. The school year ended in early June, and I spent the first 2 weeks of summer break essentially hiding in my apartment, declining invitations from both James and Rachel, and generally reverting to my pre-friendship isolation patterns. Dr. Torres called me out on it immediately when I saw her in mid-June. "You're doing the thing again," she said. "The thing where you protect yourself from potential hurt by cutting yourself off from everyone." "I'm not cutting myself off," I protested. "I'm just giving them space. They're a new couple. They don't need me third-wheeling all the time." "Did they say that, or are you assuming that?" I didn't answer. "Sophia, I know you have feelings for James. I know this situation is painful. But you're about to throw away a friendship that's been incredibly important to you because you're scared of being hurt. Is that really what you want?" "I don't know what I want," I admitted. "I just know that seeing them together makes me feel terrible, and I hate feeling terrible, and avoiding them seems like the logical solution." Except it's not a solution, it's avoidance, and avoidance doesn't solve problems, it just delays them. I knew she was right, but knowing something intellectually and acting on it emotionally are two very different things. The turning point came in early July. I was at Target, buying groceries and trying not to think about the fact that I'd spent the entire 4th of July weekend alone in my apartment, when I ran into Rachel. "Sophia," she seemed genuinely happy to see me. "I've been trying to reach you. Did you change your number?" "No, I've just been really bad about checking my phone," I said, which was partly true. I'd been ignoring her texts, but my phone worked fine. "Well, I'm glad I ran into you. Can we grab coffee? Like right now? There's a Starbucks next door." I wanted to make an excuse, but she looked so earnest that I found myself agreeing. We ordered our drinks and sat at one of the small tables by the window. Rachel didn't waste time with small talk. "Did I do something to upset you?" she asked directly. "Because you've been avoiding me, avoiding us for weeks now, and I can't figure out what I did wrong." "You didn't do anything wrong," I said automatically. "Then why won't you return my texts? Why did you cancel the last 3 times we made plans? Why do I feel like I lost a friend the minute I started dating James?" The genuine hurt in her voice made me feel terrible. Because she was right. She hadn't done anything wrong. I was the one who'd been dishonest, letting my unspoken feelings dictate my behavior in ways that weren't fair to either of them. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "You're right, I have been avoiding you, but it's not because of anything you did." "Then what is it?" I sat there for a long moment, weighing my options. I could lie, make up some excuse about being busy or needing space. I could keep hiding behind the walls I'd built so carefully. Or I could do what had terrified me for months. I could be honest. "I have feelings for James," I said finally, the words coming out in a rush. "I've had them for a while, probably since spring. And I know he doesn't feel the same way, and I know it's not fair to either of you, but seeing you together has been really hard. So I've been avoiding you both because I didn't know how else to handle it." Rachel was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she said, "Does James know?" "No, and I don't want him to know. It wouldn't change anything. He sees me as a friend, and that's fine. I just need time to get over it." "Sophia, I had no idea, if I'd known." "What would you have done?" I interrupted. "Not dated him. That's not fair either. You two are good together. He's happy with you. I don't want to ruin that because of my feelings." "But you're miserable," she said gently. "And you're isolating yourself again, which from what you've told me about your struggles is exactly the pattern you're trying to break." "I don't know what else to do," I admitted. "I can't just turn off how I feel, but I also can't keep pretending everything is fine when it's not." Rachel reached across the table and took my hand. "Can I tell you something? I almost didn't pursue James because I was worried about you." I looked up surprised. "What?" "That first time he mentioned maybe asking me out, I saw something in your face. Just for a second, but it was there. And I thought, oh no, she has feelings for him. But then you were so encouraging, so supportive, that I convinced myself I'd imagined it." "You didn't imagine it," I said. I'm just really good at hiding how I feel." "Too good, maybe," she said. "Look, I care about James, I really do. But I also care about you, and I don't want to be the reason you lose one of your only close friendships. So what do we do here? How do we navigate this?" It was such a Rachel thing to say. Direct, problem-solving, genuinely trying to find a solution that worked for everyone. "I don't know," I admitted. "This is all new territory for me. I've spent so long avoiding close relationships that I don't really know how to navigate the messy parts." We sat there for a while, both of us thinking. Finally, Rachel said, "What if we're just honest, all three of us? Not that I think you need to make some big declaration to James. I actually agree that might make things weird. But what if we're honest about the fact that this is complicated and we all need to figure out new boundaries that work for everyone? You want to tell James?" The idea terrified me. "I think secrets are what got us here," she said. "You hiding your feelings, me pretending I didn't notice, James being completely oblivious. What if we tried radical honesty instead? Not in a dramatic way, just being real about where we all are." I wanted to say no. Every instinct I had screamed at me to keep hiding, to maintain the walls, to protect myself from the vulnerability of being fully seen. But I thought about that night in the parking lot, when James had knocked on my window and I'd let him in. How that moment of vulnerability had led to the most genuine friendship I'd had in years. How hiding and pretending to be fine had kept me lonely for so long. "Okay," I said finally. "Let's try honesty." Rachel arranged for the three of us to meet at a quiet restaurant the following week. James didn't know what the meeting was about. Rachel had just told him we all needed to catch up. But I could tell he sensed something was off when he arrived and saw our serious expressions. "Is everything okay?" he asked immediately, looking between Rachel and me with concern. "Everything's fine," Rachel assured him. "Well, not fine exactly, but nobody's dying or in crisis. We just need to have a conversation." We ordered food first, making awkward small talk about summer plans and school preparations for the fall. Finally, after the server had brought our meals, Rachel looked at me expectantly. This was my cue, my moment to either be honest or retreat back into comfortable dishonesty. I took a deep breath. "James, I need to tell you something, and I need you to just let me get through it before you respond, okay?" He nodded, looking worried now. "I value our friendship more than I can really express," I began. "This past year, having you as a friend has changed my life in fundamental ways. You saw me when I felt completely invisible. You made me feel less alone. You gave me hope that genuine connection was actually possible." "I feel the same way," he started to say, but I held up my hand. "Please let me finish. The thing is, somewhere along the way, I developed feelings for you that went beyond friendship. I didn't mean to, and I tried really hard not to, but it happened anyway. And when you started dating Rachel, I didn't know how to handle that. So I did what I always do. I pulled away, tried to protect myself, ended up isolating again." I looked at Rachel, who gave me an encouraging nod. But Rachel helped me realize that hiding from my feelings wasn't working, that I was about to lose both of you because I was too scared to be honest. So I'm being honest now. I have feelings for you, James. But I also know you don't feel the same way, and I'm okay with that. I don't expect anything to change. I just needed you to know the truth because I'm tired of pretending, and I don't want to lose your friendship because I couldn't figure out how to navigate this. The silence after I finished felt endless. James sat there, his food untouched, processing everything I'd just said. Rachel reached over and squeezed my hand under the table. Finally, James spoke. "I honestly had no idea. None. I thought." He paused, running his hand through his hair in a gesture I'd come to recognize as his tell when he was stressed. "I thought we were just friends. I never saw any indication that you wanted more than that." "Because I never gave any indication," I said. "I was too scared of ruining what we had." "And now," he asked, "now that you've told me what happens?" "Now we figure out if we can still be friends knowing this," I said. "Or if it's too awkward and we need to take some space. I don't know what the right answer is." James looked at Rachel. "Did you know about this?" "Not until she told me last week," Rachel said. "And before you ask, I'm not upset. I mean, I'm not thrilled about the situation, obviously. But I understand it. Feelings aren't something we can control." I don't want to come between you two, I said quickly. Honestly, if the choice is between maintaining our friendship and you two being happy together, I choose your happiness. I'll figure out how to deal with my feelings. That's not fair to you, though, James said. You shouldn't have to sacrifice your own happiness for ours. I'm not sacrificing anything, I said. I'm just being realistic about the situation. You're with Rachel. That's not going to change because I have feelings. So I need to figure out how to be your friend anyway, or accept that maybe I can't be. We talked for almost 2 hours, our food growing cold as we worked through the complicated tangle of emotions and boundaries and expectations. James was honest about the fact that he'd never seen me romantically, that he valued our friendship, but had never considered it could be something more. Rachel was honest about feeling insecure sometimes, worried that James and I had a deeper connection than she and James did. I was honest about my pattern of running away when things got hard, about my fear of vulnerability, about my struggle to believe I deserved close relationships at all. It wasn't easy. There were moments of tension, moments of hurt feelings, moments when I almost got up and walked out because it all felt like too much. But we stayed, all three of us, and worked through it. By the end of the conversation, we'd established some new ground rules. James and I would maintain our friendship, but we'd be more mindful about boundaries. No more hours-long one-on-one conversations that could feel date-like, more intentional about including Rachel in activities when appropriate. I would work on my feelings with doctor tours and give myself permission to take space when I needed it without disappearing entirely. Rachel would be honest about when she felt uncomfortable with my and James's friendship, instead of pretending everything was fine. I don't know if this will work, James admitted as we were getting ready to leave. But I don't want to lose your friendship, Sophia. It means too much to me. We'll figure it out, Rachel said, ever the optimist. It might be messy for a while, but we're all adults who actually care about each other. That has to count for something. The months following that conversation were, as Rachel had predicted, messy. But they were also surprisingly freeing, because I didn't have to hide anymore. I didn't have to pretend my feelings didn't exist or carefully monitor every interaction for signs that I was revealing too much. I continued seeing doctor tours regularly, working through my feelings about James and my larger patterns around relationships and vulnerability. She helped me understand that my feelings for James were partly about him specifically, but also partly about what he represented: connection, safety, being truly seen. You're capable of feeling this deeply for someone, she pointed out during one session. That's actually a positive thing. It means you're not as emotionally closed off as you feared. You just need to direct these feelings toward someone who's available and interested. I started dating again, tentatively. Nothing serious, just coffee dates and casual dinners with men I met through apps or through friends. Most didn't lead anywhere, but a few were pleasant enough. I was learning how to be vulnerable in small doses, how to let people see the real me without immediately running away. James and Rachel got engaged in December, almost exactly a year after that parking lot conversation. They told me together, over Sunday brunch, a tradition we'd reinstated on a monthly basis. We wanted you to hear it from us first, Rachel said, showing me her ring, before we tell anyone else. It hurt, I won't lie. There was a sharp pang of that could have been me that I couldn't completely suppress. But it was also genuinely happy for them. They'd worked through their own challenges over the year, learning how to navigate Rachel's anxiety and James's tendency to overwork, and the complicated dynamics of blended families as James's daughters got to know Rachel. Congratulations, I said, hugging them both. I'm really happy for you. And I mostly was. The hurt was there, but it was manageable. It didn't consume me the way it might have a year earlier. Their wedding was in June, a small ceremony in Rachel's parents' backyard. I was invited, of course, and I went. I even gave a toast at the reception, talking about how James had knocked on my car window on the worst night of my life, and how that act of kindness had changed everything. James taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness, I said, raising my glass. That letting people see you struggling is actually the bravest thing you can do. And Rachel taught me that honesty, even when it's uncomfortable, is the foundation of real friendship. I'm grateful to know you both, and I'm grateful to witness the love you've found in each other." People cried, including me, but they were different tears than the ones I'd cried in my car that December night. These were tears of gratitude and growth and genuine happiness for people I cared about. After the wedding, I felt something shift. The lingering feelings I'd had for James didn't disappear overnight, but they started to fade. He was married now, fully and completely committed to someone else, and that finality helped me let go of the possibility I'd been unconsciously holding onto. I started investing more energy in other friendships. I reconnected with some college friends I'd lost touch with. I joined a book club and actually enjoyed the monthly meetings. I said yes more often to social invitations, even when my instinct was to stay home. And in September, 2 years after that parking lot conversation, I met Daniel. He was a librarian at the public library, and we met when I came in looking for books to use in my American literature class. He was funny and kind, and passionate about literature in a way that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with teaching in the first place. We started with coffee, moved to dinner, and gradually built something that felt real and solid and uncomplicated. "You seem different than when we first became friends," James observed during one of our monthly brunches, now a foursome with Daniel included. "Lighter somehow." "I am lighter," I said, smiling at Daniel across the table. "I spent so long being afraid of connection that I forgot how good it feels when you find the right one." "I'm glad," James said. "You deserve this." And the thing was, I believed him, not just intellectually, but deep down. I deserved connection. I deserved love. I deserved friendships that were real and messy and honest. I always had, I just hadn't known it. I'm 42 now, and my life looks nothing like I imagined it would when I was sitting alone in that parking lot, eating cold spinach artichoke dip and crying into my paper plate. But it's so much better than I could have hoped for. I'm still teaching at Jefferson High, still in my same classroom with the literary quotes on the walls. But I'm different. I eat lunch in the faculty lounge now, participating in conversations and even initiating them sometimes. I formed genuine friendships with several colleagues. I'm no longer the invisible teacher hiding in her classroom. James is still the principal, and we're still friends, though our relationship has evolved into something more casual and group-oriented. We don't have those intense one-on-one conversations anymore, but we don't need to. We've both found what we were looking for, he with Rachel, me with Daniel, and a broader community of people I care about. Rachel and I meet for coffee regularly, just the two of us, and she's become one of my closest friends. She's teaching me how to be more direct, more willing to ask for what I need instead of waiting for people to guess. I'm teaching her that it's okay to sit with discomfort sometimes, that not everything needs to be solved immediately. Daniel and I have been together for almost a year now. We're taking things slowly, both of us having learned from past relationships that rushing doesn't work. But it feels solid in a way nothing has before. He knows about my struggles with loneliness, my tendency to isolate when things get hard, my history with James. And he loves me anyway, not despite those things, but as part of the whole complicated package that is who I am. I still see Dr. Tours monthly, because therapy isn't something you graduate from, it's ongoing maintenance, like going to the gym or getting regular checkups. She's helped me understand that the loneliness I felt for so many years wasn't because something was wrong with me. It was because I was trying to protect myself from rejection by rejecting everyone first, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy where I ended up exactly as alone as I feared I'd be. That night in the parking lot, when James knocked on my window, was a turning point. Not because it led to romance. It didn't. Not because it magically solved all my problems. It didn't do that either. But because it taught me that vulnerability is a risk worth taking. That letting people see you struggling doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. That the connections we form when we're honest about our pain are deeper and more real than anything we can build from a place of pretending to be fine. I think about all the faculty Christmas parties I fled from over the years, all the times I ate alone in my car because I couldn't bear to be around people who seemed to have it all figured out. And I realize now that most of them probably didn't have it figured out either. They were just better at faking it. Or maybe they'd learned earlier than I did that connection requires showing up even when you feel like hiding. This year's Christmas party is coming up in a few weeks. I'm actually looking forward to it for the first time in my career. Daniel will be there as my plus one. Rachel and James will be there. Several colleagues I now consider genuine friends will be there. I'll probably still leave before it ends. I'm never going to be someone who stays until the last person leaves. But I won't be fleeing to my car to cry anymore. If I could go back and tell my 37-year-old self something, sitting in that parking lot with tears streaming down my face, I'd tell her this. The loneliness you feel right now is real and valid, but it's not permanent. The walls you've built to protect yourself are actually keeping you prisoner. And when that man knocks on your window in a few minutes, let him in. Not just into your car, but into your life. Let yourself be seen. Let yourself be vulnerable. Let yourself believe that you deserve connection and friendship and love. Because you do. You always did. You just needed to learn how to receive it. I'm Sophia. I'm 42 years old. I'm a high school English teacher who spent years feeling invisible. And I learned that sometimes the most important moments in our lives happen in the most unlikely places. Like a dark parking lot on a Friday night in December, when someone cares enough to knock on your window and ask if you're okay. The answer then was no, I wasn't okay. But I am now. And that makes all the difference.